What's going on, everyone? It's Jake here. So I've had a lot of people ask me recently about the purchase and sale agreement I'm using within my real estate business, what it looks like and what it says, and ultimately if someone else can use that agreement within their business. So that's exactly what this video is going to go over today. I'll walk through the purchase and sale agreement I use on a day-to-day basis. I'll go through it word for word with you so that way you know what it looks like and exactly what it's saying. And if you decide you want to download a copy of this at the end of the video, I'll give you a link where you can do that. All right, so before we go any farther in this video, I do need to make a quick disclaimer. I'm not an attorney, I'm not acting as an attorney, and this is not legal advice. I'm simply sharing the purchase and sale agreement that I use within my business. So if you do decide to download this and use it within your business, I highly encourage you to connect with a real estate attorney in your area so that way they can review this agreement and let you know if this is sound to use within your business or not. All right, so now that we got that disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right into this agreement. All right, so this is what my purchase and sales agreement looks like. It's pretty short and sweet. It's 12 sections long. Without any of the seller section or the signing section, it's about a page and a half long. So again, super short and sweet, straight to the point. It's pretty easy to understand. But let's go ahead and dive into the verbiage and see what exactly each section is saying. So this first section right here is labeled parties. Now this is just going to go over the parties that are involved in this agreement. It's going to touch on the address of the property you're looking to purchase. And that's pretty much what this section is going to cover. So up here we have this agreement is between blank sellers and blank buyer and or assigns. So this first blank right here would be the seller's name or seller's name if there's multiple sellers. And then the second blank would be your personal name or your company name. And then you have and or assigns, which is basically just allowing you to assign this contract if you choose to assign it to an end buyer versus taking it down yourself. Seller agrees to sell and convey to buyer, and buyer agrees to buy from seller the property described as legal description. So this blank is the legal description of the property, and you can find this within the tax records. Also known as address, and then this blank would be the actual address of the property. So 123 Main Street, 456 Center Road, whatever the address is, right? The land described, the improvements thereon, and fixtures attached thereto. So this is basically just saying that the land at the address, any improvements that were made to the property, and any fixtures that are attached to the property are going to be sold with that address when you buy it. So the second part right here is talking about purchase price. Now this is pretty straightforward. It's really just talking about how much you're going to purchase the property for. So one thing I do want to point out is this is where your earnest money deposit amount goes. Now for those of you who aren't familiar with an earnest money deposit or an EMD, it's basically money that you're putting up when you get this contract under place and you're sending it into the title company. And that EMD is basically saying, hey, I have skin in the game, I'm serious, and I'm sending in this money with this contract to show that I'm serious. It's consideration for the agreement. So in this example, we have, as consideration for this agreement, buyer shall pay an earnest money deposit of $1,000 to be held by the title company. So we have an earnest money deposit of $1,000, and then we have total purchase price and due at closing. So the total purchase price is however much you plan on purchasing the property for. So in this example, let's say you and the homeowner agreed to $303,000. So you would write out $303,000, and then the numerical value would go right there. And then due at closing, this is basically the total purchase price minus the EMD. Now, the reason it's minus the EMD is because, again, we're putting up the EMD once we get this contract signed and we send it into the title company. So although we're agreeing to $303,000, we've already sent in $1,000 to title as the earnest money, which means that we only need to bring in $302,000 at closing. Now, the only time this would be different is if your EMD is not credited towards your total purchase price. So in some examples, let's say due at closing would be $303,000, total purchase price $303,000, and then your EMD is $1,000. That means that the EMD that you put up is not going towards the price, and you still have to bring the full amount. But in most cases, the EMD is going to be credited towards the purchase price, so the amount due at closing is going to be the total purchase price minus your EMD. Hopefully that made sense, and hopefully I didn't just drag that out too long. All right, so moving on to the next section, we have title. So this is basically just saying seller shall convey to buyer title by general warranty deed. Now there's a few different types of deeds out there. There's quitclaim deeds, special warranty deeds, general warranty deeds, and I believe that's it. There might be some other ones that I'm missing. But the main thing you want to focus on here is the general warranty deed, to my understanding, basically assures to the buyer that there has been no issues with previous homeowners and the deeds that they've owned. Whereas a quitclaim deed or a special warranty deed doesn't necessarily ensure that. So by having a general warranty deed, it gives the buyer assurance that, you know, there were no prior issues with any homeowners in the past. All right, and then it says, and then again, you know, I'm not super savvy on deed types, so I could have butchered that, and if I did, I do apologize. All right, moving on. It says buyer has 3 days to inspect title commitment provided by title company and may terminate without default. If buyer chooses not to terminate, seller is allowed 15 days to cure defects or longer by approval by written approval by buyer. So basically what this is saying is, if the title commitment comes back by the title company, the buyer reviews it, and he doesn't like what he's seeing or she doesn't like what they're seeing, they can terminate the contract without default, which is basically saying that they'll get their EMD back. If the buyer chooses not to terminate the agreement and there is defects, they're allowed to give the seller 15 days as stated here, or longer by written approval to cure those defects. All right, so this next section is the closing section. It just talks about, you know, what date we're going to close on and take possession of the actual property. So it says this agreement will be closed on or before blank. So this is the day that you and the homeowner have agreed to close on the property. So for instance, it's June 25th. If you and the homeowner decided you're going to close on the property by July 10th, then you would put July 10th right there. At buyer's discretion, this agreement may automatically extend in 15-day increments as is necessary for seller to deliver marketable title. So going back up here to the title, if there were any defects on the date of closing and they're not able to close because of the title, the buyer is allowed to extend the closing date by 15-day increments for the seller to deliver marketable title if the buyer chooses to do so. Buyer and seller agree to use blank title company for closing this transaction. So this is just, you know, you would, in that blank section right here, you would put the title company you're using. And then, you know, yeah, so that's really what you would put right there, is the title company you're planning on using or the title company you are using. All right, so section number 5 talks about the closing costs. So this is basically going to spell out who's paying for the closing costs. So you can have the seller pay for it. You can split the closing costs between the seller and the buyer. The buyer can pay all the closing costs. You know, it's really up to whatever the parties have decided. Now, in my case, I'm always paying for the closing costs, and if I'm assigning it, the end buyer is always going to pay for the closing costs. So I put right here, buyer to pay all closing costs. Now it goes on to say, seller shall pay prorated property taxes and assessments for the current year and all liens and back taxes to provide a clear title. So basically this is saying that the homeowner is responsible for any property taxes up to the current date and any assessments for the year, and they're also responsible for paying any liens or back taxes that are against that property. So let's say the current property tax year starts January 1st and then it ends on December 31st. If the homeowner was selling the property right in the middle of that tax year, then they would, and let's say their property taxes are $5,000 a year, and they're selling right in the middle of their tax year, they would only be required to bring pay $2,500 for their property taxes for that year. So the prorated amount is the $2,500, And then the buyer is going to be responsible for the last $2,500 because they're taking over the property for the remainder of that tax year. Now, the liens and back taxes, that's basically saying if there's any liens or back taxes against the property, that the homeowner is going to be responsible paying for that. Again, all of this can be changed if you and the homeowner agree on it, but this is typically how we do most of our transactions. All right, so number 6 talks about the study period. Now, this is a very, very important clause that you want to make sure you always have in there. It gets broken down into 3 sections, A, B, and C. So A is basically saying the buyer shall have 14 days or however many days you choose from effective date, study period, within which to have such inspections of the property performed and or conduct a property viewing to partners, lenders, inspectors, and or contractors as buyers shall desire. So this is basically saying that you have 14 days or however many days you guys have agreed on to get in there, inspect the property, make sure that your numbers work out. You can get in there with any of your partners, lenders, contractors, architects, engineers, whoever you need to get into that property. You have that set amount of days to get those people into the property and make sure your numbers work out. B says, buyer shall be responsible for prompt payments for such inspections and repair of damage to and or restoration of the property resulting from such inspection or property viewings. So the buyer is responsible for any inspections done on the property, and any damage done during that inspection, the buyer is responsible for covering as well. And then C finally says, if buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion that the condition of the property is not acceptable to buyer may cancel this contract by delivering written notice of such election to seller prior to the expiration of the study period. Written notice may be delivered by text message, email, mail, or in person. If buyer cancels this contract within the study period, the deposits paid shall be immediately returned to the buyer. Thereupon, buyer and seller shall be released of all further obligations under this contract. Now that's a lot to digest, but it's pretty straightforward. If the buyer decides that he cancels in their sole discretion, so if the buyer chooses this property is not the property they want for whatever reason, they can cancel the property by delivering written notice within the study period. So basically what that's saying is, if you choose you don't want to move forward on this property for whatever reason, within those 14 days, you can cancel by delivering written notice in one of these ways. And if you cancel within that study period, the EMD that you've put up will immediately be returned back to you. Now, if you don't cancel within those 14 days, but you still cancel and those 14 days have already gone by, then you don't get the EMD back and the EMD goes to the seller. So you always want to make sure you get the inspection done within your inspection period or your study period, and you want to make sure if you need to cancel the contract, you cancel within your study period so you can receive your EMD back. All right, moving on to section 7. This is about the property's condition. Buyer purchases property as is with any and all defects and without warranty, except for warranties of title and warranties in this contract, but does not preclude buyer from rights of inspection, property viewing, negotiation on condition, termination options. If any part of the property is damaged or destroyed by casualty after the date of this contract, seller shall restore the property to its previous condition, and failure to do so, buyer may terminate this contract. Additionally, the sale of the property includes any and all legal, non-hazardous personal items the seller wishes to leave at the property at the time of closing. All right, this is literally just saying that we're buying it completely as is, with any and all defects, without warranty, except for anything stated within this contract. But it does not, eliminate us from having the rights to go in there and perform an inspection, to view the property, to negotiate in regards to the condition, or to terminate if we need to. If any part of the property is damaged or destroyed by casualty after the date of this contract, so let's say you went in there, everything looks good, the kitchen looked great, you get the property under contract, and the seller goes in there and just destroys the kitchen. It's basically saying that the seller is responsible to fix the kitchen and get it to the previous condition it was in when you guys got the contract. And if they don't do that, then you're allowed to cancel. And then the last part is basically saying they're allowed to leave whatever they want in the property as long as it is legal and non-hazardous. All right, acceptance is basically saying this instrument will become a binding contract when accepted by seller and signed by both buyer and seller. So basically just saying once it's signed by both parties, it becomes a legal and binding instrument. If it's not accepted and signed by seller prior to blank, this contract shall be void. Basically, that's just saying that, let's say you submit them an offer today on the 25th and you want to have a definite answer by the 27th. You could put the 27th right here. If they get back to you on the 28th and they say they want to move forward, well, the contract is already void. So now you guys need to put together a new contract, which also allows you to renegotiate, right? Moving on to number 9, talks about the representations. So it says all covenants, representations, and warranties in this contract survive closing. This contract supersedes all prior contracts for the sale of the property, and seller warrants they will not enter into any other contracts for sale of the property while this agreement is enforced. Any contracts are void without effect. So that's basically just saying any covenants, representations, or warranties. So, I don't know necessarily what a covenant is, but representations and warranties, it's literally just saying anything within this document survives closing. So anything that's stated in here, after it's closed, the homeowner or you can't come back and say, hey, this doesn't apply anymore because the contract was only valid until closing. So it's basically just saying everything within this contract will survive after closing. And then it basically says that the homeowner won't go into any other agreements while you have your agreement on that property. And if they do, the agreements that they go into are void because you already have an agreement with them. All right, 10, remedy of default. Except for Section 8, the sole remedy of default for either party under this agreement is earnest money deposit with escrow agent as liquidated damages. So remedy of default is basically just saying if a party cancels the agreement, how are we going to figure out what happens? And this is saying that if anybody cancels, the sole remedy is the EMD gets kicked back. So if I cancel for a reason not stated that I can cancel within this contract, then the EMD gets kicked back to the homeowner. If the homeowner just decides to cancel for whatever reason, they can't say, hey, give me my EMD because, they're breach of contract. So the EMD gets kicked back to the buyer. So it's basically just saying that if anyone cancels, the EMD goes, to the proper party. 11 is time is of the essence. Each contingency contained herein shall be satisfied according to its terms by the closing date, or this contract is ceased to provide time for satisfaction of said contingencies. Each party shall diligently pursue the completion of this transaction. Each warranty herein made survives the closing of this transaction. Basically just saying that everyone involved in this agreement is going to work in a timely manner to make sure this contract gets closed by the closing date. And if not, then it will extend to allow everyone to do that. And finally, we have buyer intent. Seller acknowledges buyer is an investor and engages in real estate with the intent to maximize profit. As such, seller acknowledges that the buyer may utilize entities, investors, partnerships, joint ventures, and or assignments. This is basically just telling the seller, hey, we're buying your property as an investor, not as a homeowner to live in it. And because we're doing that, we engage in making profits. So we might utilize partnerships. We might, put it into another entity. We might sell it to another entity. We might assign it to someone. So there's a lot of different routes that we can take. And it's just telling the homeowner that they're acknowledging we understand. And then finally, special provisions. This can be whatever else you want to include in the contract that's not included within the contract. So for example, buyer and seller have had the opportunity to seek independent legal counsel. A key shall be provided for access after this execution. Maybe you wanted to put one in there that said seller agrees to keep lockbox on for 10 days. You can literally put whatever you want to in here. It's just literally stuff that's not within the contract that you and the homeowner agreed on. And then finally, your executed date and your signature. So your executed date is the effective date. So once everybody signs, then the executed date goes there. And then seller signatures and printed names, all that good stuff. Pretty straightforward. So hopefully, that video wasn't too long. Hopefully I explained it well and I wasn't all over the place and you guys aren't wondering like, okay, does he actually know what he's talking about? I do. So don't get concerned. I've had this contract reviewed by many attorneys. I've taken a lot of time to sit down and review it myself to really understand what it's saying. But like I said, if you do choose to use this, there is a link in the description where you can download it. But, again, I'm not an attorney. I'm not acting to be an attorney, and this is not any legal advice whatsoever. So if you do choose to use this purchase and sale agreement within your own business, please get it checked out by a professional real estate attorney who can let you know if, yes, this makes sense to use, or no, don't use this in your business. So hopefully this was helpful to everyone. Again, I'm sorry if I dragged it out, but I really wanted to go into depth with this and really, help anyone who is using it understand what the hell they're using in their day-to-day business. So again, hopefully that was helpful. If you did find this valuable, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below. Make sure you share this with anybody who else, make sure you share this with anybody who else. I don't even know how I'm trying to say this. Share this with someone else who will find it valuable as well. And wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or night.